Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Let's do it.
Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Steve.
Indeed. So last week, I think it was last week, yeah, we talked about kings and emperors and royal monarchs and the epitome of true Western civilization and pomp and circumstance. So I figured we'd talk about hippies to kind of round things out. No, not really. It's a little in my head because of that episode, but also I was talking to Steve while we've been doing some Lego videos together, and there was just this fucking Twitter post that put this in my mind, which was a video of a hippie woman doing like yoga with her baby on the side of a mountain and stuff, and the context under or the text under it was, "It's weird to think about that this type of woman's a conservative now," and like that really sat with me, and it like made me like just go back to my thoughts on the hippie movement, which I guess I have like an interesting perspective on because my favorite genre of music is classic rock, so 60s and 70s primarily. Gets a little bit into the 80s before I start to tune out, and I can go a little bit back to the 50s before I also lose interest. But like that's the hippie music, and so I remember because I got into it in high school. I got into that genre of music, and like family, friends, and stuff knew that about me. So like I've got, and I still have it, a fucking like Woodstock t-shirt, and you know, just there's like a lot of people thought I was a big pothead in high school and stuff, and I wasn't, but you know, and that also kind of made me think about like have a particular perception of the hippie movement and stuff, and yeah, I don't know, it's weird. I really like rock music from the 60s and 70s, but goddamn, hippie culture sucks ass and go fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got this problem where the idea seems sound when you explain it to somebody, but then in practice you realize it's just consumptive capitalism with a different name attached to it. So it makes it really hard to like justify long term. I mean, I think the big thing you kind of run into whenever you talk about hippies is you talk about like anti-war and war on drugs stuff more currently, but even back then, like smoking weed and stuff, and you talk about living on communes and getting away from like the everydays of capitalism that drive everybody mad. And there's a kernel of truth in all of this, right? Like there are these notions in if you want to call it a philosophy, in hippie philosophy, that stems from like real legitimate critiques and more interesting wisdom about how we should engage with the world and how we should think about life with each other and getting away from like these sort of imposed barriers we create for ourselves. That's all fine and good. The problem is, once you start living on a commune and you have to think about how to organize your life and people have responsibilities, suddenly you're just doing capitalism all over again.
See, I don't even think it's so much that as like a rejection of capitalism. I think it's, or maybe a rejection of capitalism in and of itself, but I think it's just fundamentally it is a attempted revolutionary way of thinking that is not at all interested in actually engaging with with like the history of revolutionary thought.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so you end up producing like this really weird, kind of groundless format that is, it shouldn't be weird to think about a hippie lady as a conservative now, because in a way it was always conservative. It was
Well, and
conservative,
that's the thing.
and like, maybe at least on the surface anti-capitalist, but barely.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, at a certain point, when you've espoused these criticisms of societies at large, and then you try to live within the hippie culture, you are susceptible to totalitarianism really easily. You're susceptible to cult mindsets. There's no, like you said, there's no grounding, because there is no sort of end game that's being pushed. And without that, then everything just becomes formless and easy to appropriate. I mean, I think the sort of biggest problem with hippies and why it's so easy to see them as conservatives now is the second the hippie movement allowed itself, because it didn't have a choice, because it's not centralized, to be defined by a bare bones aesthetic of, like you said, classic rock, of tie-dye tees, of smoking weed, of just certain grammatical tics and living on reservations and shit. It's easy to monetize. It's easy to just sell that lifestyle to people to continue engaging with regular life in capitalism, but just put on a faux hippie aesthetic. And I think you see that now more than ever of the last like 10 years or so, of like, in the mall that I go to on a regular basis, there's like 3 hippie stores. They just sell tie-dye tees and stones and gems and incense and stuff. All of these things that are just like quasi-culturally appropriated, but they are essentially for white girl magic of, if I burn enough incense, then my life will get together kind of thing. All of them with the fucking peace signs on the bags and stuff. And you just turned it into a commodity. And you turned it into a commodity, so you sell it as a lifestyle, so you have lifestyle influencers and lifestyle brands, and everyone's just engaging in the hippie aesthetic because it was so easy to pull away from any concrete philosophy, repackage and sell, and the philosophy didn't have any grounds to resist it because it didn't have anything that it was trying to really stand up for aside from rebelling against things in the abstract.
That's the thing for me, because like as I've been doing all this reading of leftist state history and stuff, the line that has continuously come into my head is from the Beatles' Revolution. It's like, I don't even remember the exact wording. I just remember the scene in Across the Universe where he goes into the hippie revolutionary cell, and he's sitting there mad because they're luring his girlfriend away with the power of actual leftism, and he's singing revolution at him, and he's like, and if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't gonna make it with anyone anyhow. And it's like just the most when you actually start to understand the history of leftist revolutionary states, again, whether or not you actually agree with them, the vapid emptiness of the hippie movement starts to really, really fucking sting. So I found it so fucking amusing just thinking about that. It's like, oh yeah, Mao, who's famously pacifism gets nobody anything. Power comes from the barrel of a gun kind of mentality. And it's just, nah, man, peace and love. We're going to change the world with peace and love. And it's just, honestly, it's the most, boomer-ass philosophy.
Well, and it's a distinctly American philosophy, too, right? It's a distinctly American philosophy of a bunch of young kids in the 60s and 70s that hated the way things were, but not enough to reject any actual comforts, just enough in a way to be kind of performative, and then easily slide back into that daily grind regardless.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the quote-unquote age-old advice that really only applied to the boomer generation of, well, you'll get more conservative as you get older. And right. I think, that's just been this truism that I've heard my entire life, but like looking back through history, no one else seemed to think that way. Like these people were, when you look through like histories of revolutionaries, it's they're revolutionary basically cradle to the grave, and most of them just have an early grave. I guess they didn't have the luxury of getting older, for by and large. But I don't know. It's just such a it's just such a vapid and like gutless movement, and it's so weird because I remember in high school taking like sociology courses and stuff, and hearing a lot of talk about how the like 60s and 70s were the greatest cultural shift in American history, and I'm like, no, I believe it, but also we just, the joke about revolutions is you call them a revolution because by the end of it, you're exactly where you started. And with the hippie movement, it was like the quickest or the smallest revolution in history, because it ended up having like very little power. Like, again, I called it like a boomer moment, but there's even been like studies that the boomers took credit for all of the stuff that came from the 60s and 70s, but really it was all of their parents that did everything. And again, what a boomer thing to do.
Well, it's interesting too, because when you look at it in the way that it's been narrativized since, right? Like you look at movies from the 90s or forward, or TV shows, and there's that stereotype of the character who is stern and authoritarian in middle age, and then you learn later that when they were a kid, they were actually like the opposite. They were a hippie, they were a rebel, but then something happened to just kind of turn them into a conformist. And the way that that's depicted is usually like they were young and irresponsible, and then they decided to become responsible after something went bad. Buffy has this a little bit, where Giles, the Watcher, the stuffy British guy who's always reading books and stuttering and shit, he gets regressed to his teenage years when he was in school, and it turns out that when he was in college, he was just fucking John Constantine, smoking cigarettes all the time, and in a punk band, and wearing leather, and making out on top of cars and stuff. But the sort of the whole thing about the episode is it gives him more dimension as a character, but ultimately the right thing for him to be was the stuffy librarian in middle age, because that's where we all should end up, quote unquote.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been on my mind lately, so I figured we'd get into hippies. So is there anything, before we just completely rag on it, is there anything of value that was gained from the hippie movement, do you think? Is there what positives were gained out of hippie culture?
I think one thing that's definitely a positive is I think hippies did a really good job, and maybe they shouldn't get credit for this, but I'm going to give them credit anyway. I think the hippie movement did a really good job of normalizing the idea that drug culture, and specifically weed and things like that, are a normal part of life for people. And as time has gone on, we've just kind of come full back circled around to that philosophy again, where all the weed dispensaries and shit that pop up in all these states now, they're all coded in that hippie aesthetic. And when we started policing and creating this war on drugs, the resistance to that was still that larger aesthetic of the hippie. And there's a lot of people out there who are potheads who like can't get through a day without smoking weed constantly, and it becomes a problem. But I do think that like the kernel of what they were trying to get at there, of like the drug itself is not the problem, the criminalization of it is warranted. And again, other people did the work to start the process of problematizing the prison industrial complex and its relationship to drugs. But I think the hippies normalized that image of like, you get to grow up and you get to experiment and you have the opportunity to do those things. And even now, when it becomes this big sort of commercial endeavor, I think there is still that sort of truth of people have like that hippie phase. They have that phase in college where they know a pothead and they just smoke weed all day, or they have the conversation of like, why exactly are certain drugs legal and other ones are not, or start creating these arguments about like, well, is coffee a drug? Why is alcohol legal? Are painkillers drugs? Like, where's the line of demarcation that makes certain drugs bad and other ones not? So I think that's largely a good thing. I mean, I don't smoke weed anymore, but like, I think that's probably for the better of society that we have come around a little bit on the criminalization of it, and I think a lot of that is owed to the hippies and the hippie aesthetic.
Steve just admitted to being a bad boy.
I was really bad at smoking pot though, so like I tried, but it didn't cooperate with me. I would just have coughing fits. It wasn't fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because, like, on the drug note, again, like, so many people just assumed, oh, I mean, he's got a fro, he listens to all this 70s music, he's into pot. It's so obvious. It's like,
they thought you were a dealer.
no, pretty much. They thought I was a huge pothead, and, like, ultimately I just wasn't. And I liked the perception more than I should probably have, and more than I might be willing to admit. So I kind of like leaned into it and would have those like legalization and, you know, why is this okay or is this okay? Like where's the line at conversations, and would like, you know, posit things. But no, I tried it once. It activated the fuck out of my allergies, and I just
people don't tell you that if you want to be a pothead, you got to get over your asthma and your allergies, because those two things make it impossible.
Right. So no, I just never got into it. And it was never like, I've talked enough on the history, like my family history, and the way my brother is just a, you know, disgusting drunk and kind of always has been, always will be. And so just like that notion of substance abuse or substance dependence, I don't care like how responsible you are, whether or not marijuana itself is addictive. It's at a certain point, like, drug use is a lifestyle choice that I'm just not interested in.
For sure.
Yeah. So I never really got into like the drug side of things super heavy. Excuse me. But and I say that as a soda addict, so like it's not that I'm getting into it. But it just that side of the culture was always like the most boring side to me. And then again, my like introduction or my closeness to the culture of the hippie movement comes from music, and a good portion of the music that like people really really like only works if you're on drugs. Like I'm sorry, but good on the Beatles for making the first concept album. That's great. But the concept of their concept album is, what if the Beatles was a different band? And I just like
you're not wrong.
So like it just doesn't work for me. A lot of the other, like, I really liked Jimi Hendrix for a long time, but like I always ranked him as my number 3, and like over time that just kind of dropped further and further, because ultimately I only really liked him for being a really good guitarist, and a lot of his music, outside of just appreciating the like complexity and mastery of the instrument, is, man, aren't drugs great? Won't this be great to listen to high? That's what a lot of like quote unquote psychedelic music really is within the wider context of classic rock, is just, this is going to be so good when you're high, you have no idea. And I'm just have very little interest in a lot of that stuff. So a lot of like later Beatles, and like it's so funny for me because everyone loves the Beatles, and I'm like, okay, they start off as a boy band, then they become a drug band, and then they break up, and that's really the journey that they go through.
You're not wrong.
I mean, I'll catch some strays for it. I don't give a fuck. Like, it's just, you know, where could I be wrong in that summation of the Beatles' career? Doesn't mean that like they don't have good songs within that, but a lot of their songs are like poppy boy band shit, or just this is gonna be so good when you're on drugs. And I'm sorry, not sorry. And then you have like their big political statement: "We want a revolution, but we want it to be peaceful." Okay, that's nice.
One thing, I guess another thing I'll give hippies credit for, and I think is a sentiment that we should bring back, is when you look at the music scene and you look at like the Beatles and their popularity and the invention of pop music, hippies and punk music really overlap with this notion. And I'm sure Matt will be in the comments and he'll probably correct me about some of this. But there is definitely this overlap in both groups about the stigma against a sellout. That things are great when they're independent, that things are great when it's people in groups or individual communities expressing themselves, and the second that it becomes a popular sentiment, the second it sells out like the Beatles and has to be watered down from any sort of notion of radicalism, it becomes basically worthless. And honestly, I think that's right. I think that's 100% how we should approach most things and most art. I'm so fucking tired of seeing all these people who are like, I can't wait until all of my independent books let me be a big artist for Marvel and DC. Now, fuck that. Why are you aspiring to be a sellout? We don't need this.
That's like the Marvel DC thing is a whole separate conversation, so I won't even touch it. I'll just let Steve get his licks in against Grant Morrison.
But I mean, the hippies had this, right? Like, I think that's one of those things where, like, they had no teeth in that because so many of them ended up selling out. But I think we see them largely as a failure because that principle of not selling out was the thing that they compromised so greatly.
To an extent, I don't know, the don't be a sellout thing is, I agree with it to a certain extent, but it also is really easily manipulated into don't make money ever in your life. Just be poor and happy.
Sure, yeah, for sure.
It gets into like a lot of those fallacies of, art for art's sake, where it's like, well, if you just want to do art, then you have to make a living out of it. It's very hard to put all of yourself and all of your soul into art and not be able to make a living off of it, because the second that you're trying to make a living and do art, you're losing part of yourself to one or the other. So that's like a whole fucking separate discussion. But I'll take I'll use the principle of charity and take the best possible version of what you're trying to talk about there, and say yes, I agree that the notion of selling out, the notion of just giving in to the man or the system, is something that I think should best be served as like a cautionary in the back of your head of like, are you doing this because it's what you want, or are you doing this because it's what you're supposed to do? Is this
right.
the way that they get you? Like, what's going on here? I don't 100% disagree with that, but again, it's such a slippery slope into just stupid ass opinions of, no, just do it for free, man.
No, for sure.
The clip I saw that kind of reminds me of the quintessential image of the hippie is Leo from that 70s show of like the burnout hippie drug addict that just completely like lost his mind and got really into the 60s, as Sandlot says. But I was watching a clip from that the other day, and it was Red going to the like veterans home or club or whatever, and he's like, wearing his military uniform and hat and stuff, and he just brings Leo along with him for some fucking reason. And like when Red walks in the room, they're all like, oh hey, whatever, and then they see Leo and they're like, holy shit, oh my god, it's this guy, he's a World War II hero, he saved us all, he's like, rode a truck and he got the Medal of Honor. And like Red looks at me and goes, Leo, why did you never tell me you did any of that? It's just really not that important to me, man. But I think there is something to that idea of like the revolutionary flavor of the hippie aesthetic, of the hippie generation, is kind of built on a lot of the hard work by either their direct parents or the older members of their generation throughout the events of World War II, the silent generation into the hippies. And I find that just, a little bit fascinating. I think there is something to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about the hippies is that it is essentially a privileged political position from the onset. It is a group of people rejecting or trying to reject the comfort that they've been able to find in society because they think that there is some kind of deeper truth that comfort is keeping them from. And a lot of hippie conversations and hippie circles and lectures and stuff borrow that from like Eastern philosophy and Buddhism specifically, as that kind of rejection of a privileged place. But like, if you want to start at that position, then yeah, you have to accept that they're coming from a place where the world is for them better than it is for most of the people that they're trying to find solidarity with, and that they have an inability to relate to the problems or the work that it takes to arrive at that privileged position to begin with. And then when they get there and when they reject the privilege that they come from, it's so much easier for them to either stick out the comfort or return to the world that they came from because it's always waiting for them in a way that the people that were there already don't. The sort of two branching paths of the hippie, I feel like, is you've got the people who try it, who are like sort of emotional tourists in that space, and then return back to the world they came from because the politics were all just performative to begin with. And then you've got the people who were already underprivileged, that saw a form of community developing around hippies, and then when the hippies died out, they had nowhere to go. And they were just either drug addicts or homeless in some way or disadvantaged in some way, where like the idea of the hippie was really enticing because you started from such a low position that if these people were coming in and trying to draw attention to this wider movement, that it might be helpful. But because they weren't there to stay, it just ended up being disastrous and reactionary. And I think the greater political consequence of the hippies, because like you said, their parents are the ones that started all this, but then the result of the hippies is that tough on crime, crack down on drugs, all of the kids are deadbeats kind of philosophy that American politicians ride into in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? Like when we hear people like Reagan and Nixon rail against younger generations, they're talking about the hippies. They're talking about the deadbeats and the burnouts and the people that just kind of arrived on the scene, took advantage of the work that real political revolutionaries were doing, then left the scene worse than it started.
Yeah. It's interesting because there is something to admire. It's just, I think it's a result of how absolutely demolished the political left wing, at least within white circles, in America had become. That they just got absolutely eviscerated in the post-war period. And so that build up of like left-wing revolutionary momentum that had been going in the 20th century to that point just had nowhere to go, and they felt like they had to create something completely new from scratch. And I think, it's a mess it's a mess, and it's a wonder that there was only really like one Charles Manson.
That we know about.
That there may have been several successful Charles Mansons. You're not wrong. But, like, Charles Manson's like a great example of that, right? Because like
Yeah.
he's everything that the like right wing feared the hippies were, but fundamentally he's still like so far right in all of his thoughts and like articulations. You know, he's horrendously racist. He wants to start a race war to cleanse the earth and yada yada. He's you know just jealous about the success and the money of others, and that's why his victims are just like an accident because he was really going after one of the fucking Beach Boys. It's just it's so wild that happened, and of course, you know, fucking carved a swastika into his forehead. This wasn't subtle.
Right. No, exactly.
But it all came from, or it was dressed in, what was supposedly a left-wing ideology, and I think it's just really goes to show just how gutted the American, again, white left, because there were really strong left-wing movements in the country at the time, but they were associated with like the black community in particular, between civil rights and Black Panthers and yada yada.
Well, and to that point, right? Like, sorry, did you have more?
I was just going to say, but unfortunately, they were fighting to get their foot in the door in political power, as opposed to the, you know, predominantly white group that had political power and instead basically wasted it. But yeah.
Right, and to that point, right? Like, you contrast the hippies and the Black Panthers, and the hippies had a lot of weed, a lot of concerts, a lot of communes. The Black Panthers had neighborhoods where the police were iced out, neighborhood schools that they developed, armed militant people protecting those neighborhoods in lieu of the police, actual political demands about reparations and the plight of Black people in America. They had not only a platform and policy positions they were advocating for, but they had a structure and a hierarchy and things that allowed you to live a life that was diametrically opposed to the capitalism that they were rejecting. They had, in other words, positive values that they were trying to fight for, not just negative values that they were trying to resist. One of the things that, like the Charles Manson thing, because he essentially just does become the quintessential cult leader with his movement. One of the things that I feel like has always been really spot on about the critiques of Christianity that we got in the 1800s and like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and stuff is this notion that so much of people's understanding of religion and their relationship to religion is based on reactive principles. It's based on, I don't like this, therefore this other thing must be good. It always starts from a negation. It always starts from a reactionary place. And then that reactionary thing is what they use to springboard into a positive value. And what that leads to is the positive value that you're trying to get to is not founded on anything. It's not a value in and of itself. It's just the natural outcome of you being reactionarily opposed to something to begin with. And when you do that, any answer that addresses the negation is a satisfactory answer, whether or not it actually answers the question to begin with. So a lot of religion becomes cultish because it's not a positive value that you are learning, it's just rejecting something and then finding an answer in its place. And hippies, compared to like the Black Panthers, have that exact problem. If your defining philosophy is a rejection of capitalism and the way that people were living in the 60s, then what's your positive value that's springboarding from it? Because if you don't have a view of how life should be to begin with, that then facilitates you rejecting certain things, then the pure rejection, it's just teenage rebellion. That's all it is. It's just, I don't want to be like my dad, so I'm going to throw a tantrum and run away, but eventually I'll come back because I didn't have any positive principle guiding me in the first place.
That's something that I think is really interesting, because you brought up the like reactionary wave that the hippie movement brought in, and like that's, again, I feel like it's just treated as a truism within current American culture, but it never really, I cannot find a parallel within all the history I've read of, oh well, really your politics are just going to be the opposite of whatever your parents' politics are, because your politics are just going to be a rejection of whatever your parents believed, because that's just a natural thing for the, it's a natural part of youth. And I'm like, no, it's
right.
really weird that we had this of the hippie generation rejected the super far right views of their parents. Yeah, sure. And then their kids rejected their views and went, far right again. But I think it was just because their views were like had no foundation, had no like actual reality, and so the rejection of those and the run to the right was more of just a circumstance of it portraying itself as the left when it really wasn't. It was
right.
the toothless center at best.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think there is actually a lot of parallel to what the hippies were in the 60s and 70s with the kinds of performative online leftism we see. Because both of them are that same sort of toothless centrism at best, because all they're doing really is throwing tantrums over things that they don't like without espousing any sort of counter view or doing anything on the ground to help facilitate something better to begin with. One of the things that you learn about leftist movements around the world when you don't just focus on the United States is, like you said, the American left got demolished post-war. Like, the American Communist Party is completely fucking useless. It still exists, but it's completely fucking useless. Around the world, though, there are infrastructures for leftist groups. There are some countries where a true leftist political party is a mainstream political party, but more than that, there are revolutionary factions, there's resistance factions, depending on what country you're going in. And a lot of these communities of resistance existed prior to social media. So when social media shows up, it becomes a way for those pre-existing infrastructures to take advantage of what social media can do. The problem with America is that the infrastructure wasn't there to begin with, so the social media becomes a substitute for that. And because there is nothing to take advantage of outside of what you're posting on Twitter, there's no centrality. There's just the performative hand-wringing about things that you don't like without any sort of material backing up. And I mean, I think that started to change a little bit in the last 10 to 15 years. I think when the first major Black Lives Matter protests started to happen, I think you did see legitimately a lot more groups forming and doing continued organizing work around the country. I mean, the Sunrise Movement became a big thing around the time Bernie was running for president. So, like, there's things here now that didn't exist previously, but when the backbone of your movement is something that's immaterial, then you're not going to get very far to begin with. And we're seeing a very similar thing play out now with the online leftist versus reality and the 60s and 70s hippies versus reality, because the reactionary wave that came into power after the hippie movement used the hippies as their primary example of this is what's wrong with the country. And now the major right-wing parties that took control of America are doing the same thing. They're pointing to the insane things they see online and say, look at what the radical left wants us to do. And it becomes just an easy target with bad optics with no sort of material positives.
Yeah. Now there's Steve ending the episode again.
I just made your point with I think.
No, I think you just fucking like What's that Nietzsche quote? I aim to say in a page what others say in a book, or in a sentence what others say in a book. It's like I mean to say in a rant what others say in an entire podcast. That's the Steve Baxi version of it. No, you're just so good at like really boiling down the thoughts and connecting all the dots. I'm like sitting here trying to think through the conversation. But no, you're 100% right. I guess the other thing I want to talk about more with the hippie thing, we touched on it a little bit already, but just the inherent conservatism within it, in regards to like, you know, if we go to the alternate universe where the hippie movement succeeded and took over and everyone's living on a commune, so what is it? And like when you look at the description of what these people's end goals were, there are positives. Certainly the anti-war as a core tenet is a really good one, and you know, just self-sufficiency, not letting, you know, corporations control everything, that's also really, really good. But fundamentally, like, it's just a slightly less capitalist version of what a lot of the fucking like doomsday preppers and what just a lot of really ultra like super ultra conservative and militant Christian communities really want, to just kind of go live, you know, with their own little community where no one else is let in, certainly. And they just go to church every day and praise Jesus, and that's the gist of it. And then, you know, the women, I guess in the hippie version, maybe the women get to do more, but I think a lot of if I'm being cynical here, I think a lot of like women's liberation for a hippie movement was just insofar as it meant free sex for everybody. I don't think it was like really meant to be taken to its logical conclusion. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe that's unfair. Counterpoint, maybe your mom just really wanted to sleep around, and that's just what you need to deal with.
Unfortunate. Oh man, unfortunate. But no, you're right. I mean, it's like the Charles Manson example you gave earlier. It's so easy to take people in this space and just twist them into neo-Nazis because the core fundamental tenets really aren't that different at the end of the day, especially if you don't have like an actual counter view to reject that kind of thing. One of the things that I really like in The Dark Knight Returns, among many things, is Carrie Kelly's parents in the background. They're really negligent and they don't never pay attention to her, but there'll be like bits where they're like listening to Reagan talk on the news, and they're like ex-hippies, so they'll say, man, what did we do all that marching for in the first place? And it just makes me think, like, number one, Frank Miller seems to have cracked that code in the 80s, probably because he was young enough to remember it. But number two, it really boils down the truth of it, of like, when the hippie burnouts grow up and are faced with a more right-wing world, they're also really susceptible to the right-wing propaganda, because they don't see that the way that they were living and the things that the right wing is trying to quote unquote protect have very easy fundamental overlaps. You saw this in the last couple elections, actually, where you saw that there was a group of undecided voters, a really large portion of undecided voters, who were like, I don't know, I could either do Bernie or I could do Trump. And that seems insane when you think about anything on paper. Like, how could you possibly be between those two of all people? But when you hear them talk and they start to say things that align with really basic populist needs about, like, I want to feel safe when I go to school, I want my gas prices to go down, I want my groceries not to be expensive, you start to realize that, number one, American people in general tend to have a very basic individualist perspective of like, am I comfortable? And number two, it's really easy for anybody on any side of the conversation to start giving you reasons for why you can't have those things. And the right is just very good at giving you the entirely wrong reasons for it. And so like if the hippie mentality or the modern like centrist voter, if both of them are doing the same thing of like, yeah, our way of life sucks and the world's in a bad place and I feel like none of this is working. Well, who's giving you an alternative? And most of the time, it's going to be the right wing because the left wing is really bad at talking to those issues.
I don't even think it's the left wing. It's just the quote unquote left that is allowed to exist within the American political system.
Right.
The reason the liberals are so bad at seizing left wing momentum is because they don't really want it. They just want the aesthetic of it, which again is so like true to the hippie movement, because that's the fundamental, like, in my mind, and maybe this will get me in trouble with somebody in the future. In my mind, the fundamental defining characteristic of being an American is an overwhelming amount of selfishness. Which is just, it sounds really basic, but like once you really start to think through that, it explains so much. And like it's not even that it comes from nowhere. It's the again, in reading history, the thing that as an American I've had such a hard time like truly wrapping my head around is just accepting that I cannot imagine what it would be like to be invaded, which is just not something any other country in history has ever like had the luxury of.
Right. Exactly.
Is just the like analysis of Hitler's plans for the possible invasion of America are just laughable, because it is just a natural fortress. And so the national character that creates is just absurdly selfish. And it makes sense of like why capitalism, gets such a stranglehold of power here, is because it just works so well and blends so seamlessly to that inherently selfish attitude. And again, so what is the I think it's fair to say, even though a lot of it's like influenced by like British invasion artists and stuff, but even then, like the British invasion artists are inspired by the suppressed American black artists, right? So like, what is the homegrown utopianism of the American quote unquote left, that is, it's their own independent idea, and it's fundamentally, no different from what the conservatives want, except that maybe there's just a different kind of quote unquote personal liberty and freedom. Really the only thing that changes between these two visions of utopia, whether it be like the Christian fundamentalist or the drugged out hippie, is the like who's allowed to have sex with who and how important is religion. Otherwise, like, they both are relatively pro-drug, because you can put whatever you want in your body, or you can't put anything in your body. Like they end up having just almost the exact same thing, just swapped.
Yeah No, absolutely. It's unfortunate because I feel like when we started, like there is a logic to why people decided to do this, and there is some benefit here and there, but like you said, America is fundamentally always thinking in these selfish terms. I mean, anytime we have any sort of great social upheaval, it's not because of the benefit of the masses in spirit. It's because of so many people are so specifically, personally affected by something to the point where they all complain in mass, right? Like, when we start thinking about like the draft dodging that happened in the 70s and the number of people that specifically individually did not want to be drafted. It's important too to recognize in America every time a person turns 18, you used to have to sign up for selective service or the draft, and now they just let it happen automatically when you turn 18. But the reason they do that is because all government services that you are eligible for as a citizen, you cannot have access to if you're not registered for selective service. So doing it automatically saves people the hassle of forgetting and then realizing they can't get their social security check or whatever. But it's still kind of an insane idea that all of these people complained about not wanting to be drafted, and the best the government was able to do and the best that we were able to accept was, well, we won't have a draft anytime soon, and that's it. And like even now, when you look at like all of the adamant resistance to Trump, there were a lot of protests, and there were the No Kingers protests and stuff about the spirit of democracy in general. But what are the things that are like really actively driving like the negative Republican town halls and the things that are driving people to be angry now? It's their gas prices. It's their electric bill. It's the things that inconvenience us on an individual level, and it's not being thought of or articulated or argued for from the perspective of what's the greater benefit of society here. No one's going to these town halls and complaining about their electric bill because this community is running out of water in a drought area. They're complaining because their bill is too high. And that might get you somewhere, but that somewhere is not like a coherent social movement that fixes the problem. It's just a naturally American selfishness where we think about everything in individualist terms because, one, we're trained like that from a very young age, but two, like you said, we don't have the historical perspective to think about things like another country invading us, another country dictating the terms of our economy or our trade, because for most of our lifetime, it's always just been us.
Mm-hmm. And that's like it's interesting. We're getting kind of far away from like the hippie thing in particular, but like it's interesting that that's the fear with China. Like I remember back during the Obama-Romney election in 2012, I remember a late stage campaign ad where they like really just start throwing everything at the wall, right? Like that those last couple months, you know, when it should be the real election, but that's neither here nor there. Side notes to this side note. I'm perfectly okay with just a forever dictatorship if it means I never have to sit through another fucking 3-year election cycle. You know, like I just fucking take it.
FDR had it right, man. He could have just kept going.
He tried.
He did. He tried until his body gave out.
Yeah. But like I remember during the Romney election, there was a campaign ad that came on, and it was like it was bold because they like put subtitles on the thing even though it was English, so it would like trick your brain into thinking that they were speaking Chinese. But they're explaining with like a slideshow of all the ways that the American empire was in decline and like getting into more and more debt, and then it just like cuts to a wide shot and it's like a, you know, Chinese guy talking to his class of Chinese students, and he's like, and now we own them, and like they all laugh. And it's just fucking Mitt Romney. I support this message. It's like, if Obama's gonna sell us to the Chinese with his debt and his constant socialism. And it's just such a like quaint idea of like that's the fear mongering of the American right at the time, and now it's like no, we can go in debt and we'll just have the strongest military, so when they try to call our debt we just say fuck you. And honestly, it's not the worst plan ever, but,
yeah. It sounds like a quintessentially American plan at the very least.
It really does. I again, like, I don't think any political philosopher should ever be celebrated more than the guy who said everybody is 12. I think that truly the political philosophy of our time.
To get back to the hippie thing, the as far as I know, there's a lot of like counterculture movements throughout the world, and the hippies are a kind of counterculture movement. But the hippies in particular, I guess the ones that we've been talking about, they are like a uniquely American phenomenon. So it kind of makes sense that this is the way we're talking about them, because they are just they're the Americans' idea of individualism turning to community. It's the Americans' idea of resistance to capitalism, in that it is hollow and performative. I was going to quote the Mandarin, but I didn't. But also full of lies. But like, what's interesting though is like the idea that you could be counterculture, the idea that you could like be rebelling, and that makes you cool, turning around and becoming the establishment again. This is kind of related to hippies, but it's also related again to like the punk rock and like this notion that's been passed around the last few years of like the Republicans are the real punk rock because they conform, I guess. I don't know. But there is this weird desire for the right wing to see themselves as the counterculture, for them to see themselves as they're not in the mainstream, and they're resisting the politics of the larger left that is in power conspicuously, and it builds that larger point of like the hippies are so hollow that anybody can espouse hippie talk, and it doesn't matter what the substance of what they're saying is, because the right wing can so easily position themselves as counterculture because the actual counterculture groups have nothing to stand on, or didn't have anything to stand on in American culture.
Yeah, pretty much. It's interesting because like you mentioned the punk rock thing, the disturbing number of people saying, yeah, I'm MAGA and punk, we exist. And it's like, no,
right.
we don't.
What machine were they raging? Tell me that. What machine were they raging against?
Well, it's again just like this. So I've got a couple of wild and crazy thoughts, and one of them is that the anti-jury duty sentiment, I think, is a massive government psyop.
We've talked about this. Yeah.
I'm not a huge conspiracy theory guy. I think sometimes conspiracy theories give these institutions too much credit, in all honesty. But every time I see like, oh, I've got to get out of this jury duty, going to jury duty is boring or stupid, and I'm like, no, that's some writer was paid by the CIA to put that in the script for this Simpsons episode, and you will not convince me otherwise. Like even shows I like 30 Rock has an ongoing gag of every time Liz Lemon gets jury duty, she wears her Princess Leia costume to the selections to get out of it, and it's a very funny joke, but at the same time, like why is so much there is one joke in all of media I've ever seen that like portrays jury duty in a positive light, and even then it is a roundabout joke about how stupid and awful jury duty is, where it's Hank Hill saying, no, if I don't vote I won't be eligible for jury duty.
You know what though, this reminds me, maybe you and I should just talk about 12 Angry Men one of these days.
Yeah, no, I'm down.
That's just your vibe right now.
Well, no, it's just I will be the 13th Angry Man. I will join these 12 Angry Men, and together
by your powers combined, I am the justice system.
Yeah, no, but like I think that like the rejection of jury duty as like a civic institution is like intentional. I think the rejection of education, school is boring, man. Just like there's some we haven't talked about with the hippie movement that I think is just fundamental to it and goes to show just again the lack of foundation. What's the most famous hippie fucking slogan? Tune in, drop out, and turn on. Right? The fundamental, and you mentioned about the it comes from a position of privilege. Not only are you privileged enough to get to go to university, you're privileged enough to turn dropping out of university into a political statement. And
Right.
it is just fundamentally the anti-intellectualism of the hippie movement. The idea that school is boring, that history doesn't matter, that none of this is really important. Whatever the fuck the true mentality you want to get to underlies it is just so goddamn stupid and speaks to why it had no foundations.
Right.
Yeah. Tune in, drop out, and turn on. What a fucking stupid movement.
I mean, and it's not even like realistically different from going to college and joining a party school, right? Like you're not doing anything different. You're just not paying tuition at a certain point.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't believe we waited this long to talk about that, of just the fundamental lack of education. And there's a good reason for it, right? So what was the hippie commune? It was a bunch of fucking city kids that dropped out of college and thought, oh yeah, we'll just go live on a farm and no one will really have to work that hard and we'll just grow enough food for all of us to eat. And 2-3 years, maybe at best, maybe a decade, and everyone leaves because no one's doing the work and they're all starving to death.
There's an episode of, I know we mentioned it a couple times already, but it's a good show. There's an episode of King of the Hill about this, where Hank and Bobby and the gang go to a national park to go camping, and everyone's supposed to pull their own weight. So if you want to eat dinner, you have to fish for a fish. And Bobby can't fish, so he wanders into the forest and finds a hippie commune. And they're like, yeah, you can take whatever you want. And then after his second dinner or something, they're like, you've just been taking, you got to get us something. And so he has to pawn off Hank's fishing rods and shit to pay off the hippies, because at a certain point it all just becomes transactional. But the way they solve the problem, the way they get rid of the freeloading hippies, is Hank goes to the park ranger and they're like, this is a national park, right? What if you just stopped servicing the park? The second it becomes too inconvenient, they all leave.
Mm-hmm. That fucking tracks. Again, it's that, that's not unique to America, the, utopianism thing. I know it happened a lot in, Russia. It was one of the proto-leftist movements before the revolution and stuff. And there's examples of utopianism going back further in American history and yada yada yada. So it's not particular to the hippie movement, but again, it goes to the anti-intellectualism of the hippie movement because, clearly no one around had read about any of these attempts at utopianism. Oh man, already it's really hard to get people to do work without financial motivation. Let's add drugs to the thing and and that'll fix everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have no doubt.
I mean, that's maybe I'm being a little unfair. I have heard about nudist and more niche fringe communes that did actually end up relatively successful, all things considered. I mean, they didn't change the world, but they also didn't collapse after just a couple of years, so good for them. I think there might even still be a couple that are hanging around by a thread, but we'll see.
Well, and you do have successful examples even in the U.S. of like Quaker schools and stuff that live off a philosophy that is more hippie in spirit, and they seem to do pretty well for themselves. I have a friend who whose kids go to a Quaker school that everything seems like it works out pretty well, with the exception of just always being perpetually understaffed. But I mean, that's just school, so I can't blame the hippies for that one.
You could.
I probably could. One thing I wanted to make sure we get to, because I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm curious because I don't really know how I feel about it either, is whether or not the hippies are doing a form of cultural appropriation. Because so much of the aesthetic of the hippie, the clothing, the bags, the stuff that you can buy in stores now, it'll have like symbols from, it'll have like Buddhas on there, it'll have like Hindu symbols on them. You have like these cheaply made plastic incense holders that are in the form of Hindu deities. You'll see a lot of white guys in dreadlocks. There's a lot of like Caribbean flags and stuff that go hand in hand with the weed and pot culture. And I wonder about some of that stuff because I'm not one to like cry cultural appropriation at most things, because I think at a certain point you're gonna run into a situation where someone comes in contact with a culture and either adapts to it or borrows from it, and that's just a natural way that they live life. Like, I don't think white people going to martial arts schools is cultural appropriation. It's just what happens when you build martial arts schools in the Americas. But I do think there is something about, like, when we talk about the sort of hollowness of the hippie movement and how easily it was able to be subsumed into capitalism as just an aesthetic that you can buy, I think the cultural appropriation criticism maybe becomes a little bit more warranted, because you're initially saying you're grounding your worldview in either these Latin American countries or in these Eastern countries, and you're then allowing those things to be subsumed into capitalism and only engaging with them superficially. Where, like, you don't see hippies that convert to Hinduism. Like, that's not a thing. You don't see hippies convert into one of the many forms of Buddhism. I'm not saying that they should necessarily, but it does kind of rub me the wrong way when I go into a chain store where everyone is just like a white teenager behind the counter and they're selling me like packages with Ganesh on them. Like, that just kind of bothers me.
Ganesha, that's how you pronounce it?
Ganesh.
Ganesh, the elephant head god?
Yep.
Okay, so...
The one whose head was chopped off by his dad because the kid was annoying.
Oh, well, see, I don't know how the mythology is. It sounds fucking dope, though.
No, seriously, I'll give you this story real quick. So Ganesh was formed from clay by his mom. So his mom fasts and prays over this clay model that gets brought to life and becomes her son. Then the kid goes and walks out, because he's born like literally just a kid, and meets his dad, and the dad has no idea what's happened, and the kid's fucking annoying, so he cuts off his head, and then his wife comes in and he's like, "What'd you do? That's your son." And he's like, "Oh, might be. I'm gonna chop off the head of this elephant and give it to him instead."
It's fucking dope.
I had this story as a kid. You don't understand. I had like a video of this tape, and I'd watch it daily for years on end because it's so fucked up.
Okay.
Sorry, continue.
Well, I wanted to talk about that because it's funny, because I work with a girl, and she's a white girl, and she converted to Hinduism, in her 20s or whatever. And it's funny because, like, her parents, I guess, did a really good job of raising kids that converted to Hinduism, because, like, collectively all of her and all her siblings did it, but, like, independently of each other, which is really funny. Not that their parents raised them to convert to Hinduism. Their parents raised them, and then they all independently of one another converted to Hinduism, which I thought was very, very funny. But she had a little idol of Ganesh that she brought into work, and she put it on her workstation, which is like, it's her station, but there's very few people that just have their own desk. There's a lot of like communal workspaces, Like, oh, I need a computer, so I'm gonna sit down here real quick and do it. And so she had her little idol there, and we work in a place with a bunch of little plastic things that end up all over the place, and sometimes you see it on the floor, and you're sitting there waiting on the computer to run something. So you give Ganesh a little D20, and you sit on his fucking on his fucking lap or whatever, like see if you can balance one on the hand. And so she had to put a little fucking sign under Ganesh that said, "Please stop putting objects on my god."
Oh my god.
And I felt bad for her, but at the same time, like, she was approaching it with a level of humor. Please stop putting objects on God is just such a fucking great sign.
I need that. That's awesome.
It's like, if I had a fucking crucifix hanging there, no one would think to put a fucking D20 on
Right.
Jesus' head, right? Like, that would be insane.
Right.
Maybe someone would.
Yeah. But I mean, and I'm...
But
Sorry, go ahead.
To your question, though, about, like, cultural appropriation, yeah, probably an element of it is, but it's gotten to the point where I think the definition of cultural appropriation has maybe grown to be too all-encompassing, to the point of, like, when you look at what defines a culture, most of it is just, oh, well, this group of people did it, and then this group of people, like, adopted it slowly, and it just kind of took off. And eventually you get back and, like, are you gonna accuse, like, fucking a Buddhist Chinese person of culturally appropriating someone else's religion? No, but, Buddhism didn't originate in fucking China. That's
right.
Like, the biggest base of its, or one of the biggest bases of its population to one of the biggest Buddhist populations is, of course, in China. Is one of the words. So at a certain point, like, cultural appropriation, I think, begins to mean less and less to me, because that's how culture works. Like, someone that was not part of their cultural background becomes introduced to a practice and finds it interesting and begins to at least perform it, if not fully adopt it. That's right. Just how culture spreads. It's kind of a nothing term to me at this point.
That's maybe where I land more so, because I also feel like if you're going to come up with a term to describe something, and this is why, like, I'm always so technical about using philosophical words correctly, because when you have a philosophical term, the term is doing work. The term is giving you something to perform a framework for your thinking to begin with. So, like, deconstruction means something. By doing deconstruction or calling something a deconstruction, you're putting it within a certain framework of how it's working, and it changes your understanding. And cultural appropriation is one of those things where I feel like it's not a phrase that has any sort of additive quality at this point, where calling something cultural appropriation doesn't in and of itself explain what the hell's going on with it. So if it doesn't do that job, then is it really a phrase worth utilizing in the first place? And especially when it comes to, like, how much this stuff is proliferated at this point, I just have a hard time. My parents are Hindu. I grew up Hindu, but I'm not, obviously. But I also have a hard time being, like, needing to defend the honor of Hinduism against white people, when the people practicing Hinduism over there in India have enforced a caste system for generations and have allowed violence against women constantly, and are this insane right-wing government just genociding people in the streets and stuff, much like here. Like, I don't know. Maybe Hinduism isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Maybe people should put D20s on God. I don't know. Like, what honor am I fighting for, really?
That's fucking funny. I don't know. I just remember the beginning of Dogma where Matt Damon as an angel is talking, as a fallen angel, is talking to a nun, trying to convince her that the scene with all the teacups in Alice in Wonderland is a critique of religion. And he goes, well, there's the elephant, so that's your Eastern gods.
Fucking love that. That's awesome.
It's such a fucking broad statement.
That's awesome.
Oh,
You've heard the arguments that Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown is Charles Schwartz's critique of religion.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I love the Great Pumpkin.
It's good. It's good. That's my deity. Don't put D20s on the Great Pumpkin.
It's a good idea for a Christmas gift now that you say that.
Oh, all right. Well, I feel like we've really covered the gambit on this one. So yeah.
Far out, man.
What does Ian and Richard Nixon have in common? We both fucking hate hippies.
It's the only thing you have in common.
That you know about.
That's fair. That's fair.
You haven't found my.
Where are the wiretaps, Ian? Where are they?
Oh, man. All right. Well, that'll do it. Everyone, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Luddite.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.